All right, so what does all this mean? Here to help walk us through this, we welcome back criminal defense attorney John Manuelian, who's covered this very closely. John, good to see you. Well, I got to get your take on what is really breaking news. That Trayvon Martin's mom would flat out say on the Today Show she believes this was an accident. Just your reaction to that, and how and could it undermine any kind of second-degree murder charge?
Well, she could be right. You know, it could be an involuntary manslaughter charge where ultimately the jury finds him guilty of criminal negligence, meaning that he acted above and beyond what he should have. It might not rise to the level of a depraved mind, ill will, hatred, or spite, but it may be a lower charge, such as the involuntary manslaughter charge.
Okay. So to be clear, she believes accident. Could you have what potentially could be an accident and still a second-degree murder here?
No. And,
okay.
and Mike, I don't think the second-degree murder charges are going to stick with the jury. To me, that's overcharging. I think manslaughter is overcharging. I think an involuntary manslaughter may be more on the bullseye for the prosecutor and easier to prove. Look, they didn't arrest him for 40-something days. Something must have either happened, new piece of information that caused the prosecutor to believe that George Zimmerman wasn't either telling the truth, or it could just be a factual dispute, and the prosecutor, Angela Corey, is saving face by filing the charges and letting a jury decide whether or not the facts are Mr. Zimmerman's way or the other way.
Okay. So when you look at that, and the judge we heard from moments ago laid it out there, and you've talked about it as well, ill will, hatred, depraved mind, and we don't know all the facts yet. We don't have everything laid out in front of us. But from what we do know, what's come out in drips and drabs, I mean, is it that 911 call where it could be interpreted that George Zimmerman uses, he curses and then a racial slur? Is that something a jury might hear? And is that where you might get hatred or an ill will?
There was no racial slur on that audio, Mike. All he said was he called the guy punk. And when he said it was, and at some point inside, he said it was effing cold. He didn't call Mr. Martin any kind of racial epithet. So there is no such fact. Look, he contacted the police at 7 o'clock, made a phone call to 911, tell them that there was somebody suspicious in the neighborhood. And at about 7:15, he was told to stop following him, and he did. If you believe George Zimmerman, at this point in time, he walks over. Trayvon Martin comes up, says, "Do you have a problem?" And he says, "No, I don't have a problem." And he tries to take out his cell phone, tries to make a 911 call. Then, according to Mr. Zimmerman, Mr. Martin punches him. He falls to the ground. It's corroborated by a witness that saw a person with a red jacket was on the bottom while a larger man was on top punching him. That was told to Fox News in Orlando. So there's a lot of reasonable doubt here, Mike.
Okay, and I know we've talked about it in numerous cases, the reasonable doubt. But let's get back to that 911 call. And you said it was punks. Others would argue the other way. Will a jury argue that in a jury room? Will Special Prosecutor Angela Corey play that and have that out before a jury?
I'm very sure they're going to have experts interpreting what he said either way, but it's ultimately going to come down to Zimmerman. You know he's going to testify, and they got to rely on what he's saying.
Okay. John, thanks again. I want to let everybody know John Manuelian is hanging around, and he's going to be answering your questions. So many of you have reacted. You followed this as closely as we have here on HLN, and our social media producer is compiling your best questions. John's going to hang around about 5 minutes from now. He's going to be answering some of your questions, or as good as questions as we come up with. So, John, we'll talk to you in just a little bit. We continue to monitor the latest in the Trayvon Martin shooting. Again, just over an hour from now, 1:30 Eastern, we expect to see George Zimmerman making his first court appearance. You can see it live right here on HLN. George Zimmerman charged with second-degree murder in the shooting death of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin. This has many of you talking, many of you asking some great questions, and our social media producer, Anna Gonzalez, has been monitoring, as always, Twitter, Facebook, our own website to get some of the best questions. And there you see attorney John Manuelian sticking around to answer some of those. So, Anna, let's get to it. What are some of the questions out there?
Well, first, I just want to say thank you so much to everybody who included us in the conversations that were happening online. If you look at this story on HLNTV.com, it's well over 18,000 shares, and people were talking about different aspects of this case. And so some of the questions that we were asking that were posed to us, they were on Facebook. It's facebook.com/HLN. And one of the questions that we had posted on Facebook was from Nina Hickson. So that we want to know, John, why didn't he get the first degree?
Well, first degree typically is defined as a homicide that was committed with the intent or premeditation to commit a homicide. So it would be very difficult to charge George Zimmerman with premeditation because you would have to show beyond a reasonable doubt that he actually formulated his mind to kill Mr. Martin. It's a very high standard and it's a high risk. So from a prosecutorial standpoint, much tougher to prove.
Thank you, John. So now this is another question that we are getting on Facebook. So Nikki Brown says, many people are saying that he has been overcharged. We're seeing that debate happening on Facebook.com/HLN. So if he was overcharged, what were some of the charges lesser charges that he could have faced?
As I was telling Mike, I think the right charge and the better charge is involuntary manslaughter, where you show that there's criminal negligence. And I think a jury could bite onto that a lot better than either manslaughter or second-degree murder. Those are much, much higher charges. So the involuntary manslaughter, if they show that he had negligence that rose to a level of criminality, and that will be defined in the Florida statute, then he could be found guilty. Much less time in prison, but that's more of a certainty than the charges, in my opinion, that he's being charged with right now.
Hey, John, Mike here again. So if you're defending Zimmerman, what about the facts that you and I know right now would concern you the most about second degree, where you're looking at it going, I don't know, maybe they do have second degree here?
The timeline, Mike, it all depends on what he was doing when he was doing it. If Zimmerman's account that Trayvon Martin followed him and came to him and hit him, it was proven to be true, then he's got a great defense, and maybe at the worst case scenario, he'll be found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. But it all, again, it goes to the timeline and what the evidence will show. It's hard for me to tell you because there's nothing that I have that I've seen that could go either way at this point. But based on what I'm hearing, there are some things that I think Mark O'Mara will use to show that second degree is an overcharge.
Got it. We have time for another question, guys? No. Okay, that'll do it. It's okay. So, Anna, great job compiling some of those questions. They're the questions you guys are asking. John, thanks for hanging around.